Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
Good Chodesh Tov. Today's Mishnah is sponsored by the Garland children. The Seich HaNishmas, memory of their uncle, Gavriel ben Moshe Nochem, the Neshama Shavan Aliyah.
Amen.
Okay, so it's Parak Aleph, Chapter 1, Mishnah Gimel, Mishnah 3. Eved Kanani, a Canaanite slave, Nikne Bekesef, is acquired through money. Now, that means that the master, the one who's going to become his master, pays for him, and through the money, it becomes his. Now, who's he buying him from? So I'm reading here from the notes. A Canaanite can sell himself or his son as a slave. A slave can also be sold by his master to someone else. Whatever the case, the buyer can acquire the slave by paying the seller. The seller can be himself. The seller can be the father. The seller can be a different master. Okay, so is nikna bekesef, with money, ubishtar, or with a document, which means the seller gives the buyer a document in which it is written that he is transferring the slave to the new master. Uba chazaka. The third way is chazaka, which they translate as an act of ownership. The slave does an act that is usually done by a slave for his master. That, for example, as they bring down here, he puts on or takes off the master's shoes, or rubs oil into his skin. These are the kinds of acts that a slave would do, and therefore, if he does that kind of act, that is a means by which to acquire him. The kainaz atzmai. Now, this Eved Kanani, this Canaanite slave, can acquire himself, and he can become free, bekesef al yedei acherim, through money given by others. That means someone else pays the master for him. Okay? Someone pays the master the slave's value for the purpose of freeing him. And the slave thus becomes free, even if he does not know about it or agrees to it, which we'll talk about soon. But the point here is, the first thing mentioned here, how does he acquire himself? He acquires himself bekesef al yedei acherim, money given by others, ubishtar al yedei atzmai, and with a document of freedom that's given to him himself. The document states, you are hereby free, and that is something that has to be received by the slave himself. Now, Divrei Rebbe Meir, these are the words of Rebbe Meir. Now, there's a couple of things that have to be explained. Rebbe Meir is being very specific. He can acquire himself through money, through others. Others pay the money. How about if he has money? The answer is, there's no such thing as a slave having his own money, because whatever a slave acquires automatically goes to the master. So there's no way for him to have money to buy himself out. And therefore, it has to be somebody else. And somebody else who buys him is buying him for the purpose of freeing him, not paying to buy him to him for himself, but he's giving the money to the master in order to free him. Now, the fact that it says, now the second part of the Mishnah says, but the shtar, the document, has to be through him. So what that implies is that it is possible to free a servant with money without even telling him. You don't got to tell him, doesn't have to agree to it. You can free him anyway. By you giving the money to the master, you can free him, whether he knows about it or not. In the case of shtar, though, the halacha is that a shtar, a document, is something that he himself has to acquire directly. He can't do it through somebody else. It has to be done through him, which really means it has to be done with his consent. Divrei Rebbe Meir, these are the words of Rebbe Meir. And we'll explain now. We'll explain more soon. The Chachamim say, but kesef al yedei atzmai, actually by money, it's possible he should do it on his own, with his own money. Ubishtar yedei acherim, and he can do a document through others. Ubelvashi akasem mishal acherim. When we talk about the money has to come from others. Okay, so let's work through the Chachamim. And then we'll explain what the argument here, because you have Rebbe Meir saying money through others, a document through himself, and the Chachamim say money through himself and a document through others. Now, these others who are accepting the document have to act as his shliach, as his agent. They have to be in his place. But according to the Chachamim, you could actually accept a document of freedom for a slave even without him knowing about it. According to Reb Meir, it has to be through him. He has to know about it, which really means it's going to have to be done, direct. He's going to himself have to be the one to receive it. But according to the Chachamim, it's possible for someone else to actually receive the document without the slave's knowledge about it. Now, so what's the question? So what's the issue here? The issue is like this. I'm going to read to you here from the notes. As a rule, a person can acquire something on behalf of his friend without the friend's knowledge or consent, but only if it is a complete benefit for the friend. That's called Zachin la'adam shalei b'fanav. You can benefit someone even not in front of him, even without his knowledge. For example, if Reuben buys an object with the intention of acquiring it for Shimon, Shimon thereby acquires the object even if he knows nothing about it. It's considered a complete benefit, and therefore you can do it even without him knowing about it. However, if acquiring that object is not a complete benefit for Shimon, if for some reason acquiring that object is not a complete benefit for him, no one can acquire it for him unless he agrees. You need his consent then. So our Tana holds, meaning according to Reb Meir, it is not a complete benefit for a slave to go free. You cannot go ahead and accept a document of freedom for a slave without his consent, because actually, according to Reb Meir, him becoming free is not considered a complete benefit. And the reason for that is, our Tana holds that it is not a complete benefit for a slave to go free, because when he is freed, he becomes a full-fledged Jew. That's the rule. An Eved Kanani, while he's an Eved, is obligated in mitzvahs like a woman, but he can't marry a regular Jewish woman. He can marry a Shivcha Kananis, a Canaanite slave woman, but he cannot marry a Jewish woman, a regular Jewish woman. Now, so now, by being freed, he becomes a full-fledged Jew and thus forbidden to cohabit with a female slave who was permitted to him while he was a slave. It is assumed that a slave considers this a disadvantage. Therefore, no one else can acquire a freedom document for him without his agreement. That's Reb Meir. It's got to be al yedei atzmai. It's not a benefit for him. Now you may ask, okay, 1 minute. Well, what about the fact that others can give money to him? That means that others can go to the master, pay his value, and he's freed, and you don't got to ask him. Yeah. So they explain here, however, a slave can be freed with money even without his consent. This is because his consent is needed only where he has to acquire something, which in this case is the document of freedom. No one can acquire it for him without his agreement, because it's not a complete benefit being free. However, when a slave is freed with money, he does not acquire anything. The master simply accepts the money and the slave goes free automatically. He's not acquiring the money. You're not giving the money for him. You give the money to the master accepts it, and you basically brought him into freedom. He's not acquiring anything. And therefore, he's acquiring himself, so to speak. He becomes free. But what's happening, the means by which his freedom is coming about, has nothing to do with him acquiring something. It's just about the master gets the payment, and that's it. And therefore, you don't need his consent. In the case of the shtar, you know what I mean. You can't. The shtar has to go to the slave. He has to acquire it in order for it to work. Okay, in that situation, if it's out for his benefit, he's got to do it. No one else can do it for him. Okay, according to the Chachamim who said that actually somebody else could accept the shtar from him, could accept the document of freedom for him, even without his knowledge. What do they hold? According to the sages, it is a clear benefit for a slave to become free. The advantage of becoming free from slavery outweighs any disadvantages that may be involved, as we mentioned before. Therefore, someone else can accept a freedom document for a slave, because a person can acquire something for his friend without his consent. It was a clear benefit for the friend. Okay, so that's basically the argument between Reb Meir and the Chachamim about being able to accept a document of freedom for a slave without his knowledge, without his consent, is whether the freedom is considered a complete benefit. There's clearly benefits involved. That's not the question. But is it a complete benefit? According to Reb Meir, it's not a complete benefit. And according to the Chachamim, it is a complete benefit. Whatever disadvantage doesn't matter in face of the advantages. Now, the other thing that they argued about was that Reb Meir said other people have to give the money. The Chachamim said he can give the money. But then they could qualify that at the end of the Mishnah when they say, but the money has to come from other people. You know what that means? That means like this. That means someone gives the money to the slave. He gives the money to the slave, and he stipulates that it should not become the master's property. Such money does indeed become the slave's, and if he wants, he can use it to buy his freedom. So basically, according to the Chachamim, there's another machlokes here between Chachamim and Reb Meir, and that is like this. We said the slave doesn't have his own money because anything he acquires goes to the master. The Chachamim say there's an exception. If you tell the slave when you give him the money, I'm giving it to you on the condition that it does not become the master's property. That's the stipulation. I'm giving it to you, and I'm stipulating it does not become the master's. The Chachamim say it works. If the slave finds something, or somebody just hands him a gift, that money goes to the master. However, if the person giving them a gift stipulates that it shouldn't be the master's, it should only be his, it works. If it works, now he's got money. Now that he's got money, he can go ahead and free himself. Have a wonderful day. Chodesh Tov. Adon Chodesh.
Thank you, Rabbi.